All right, Courtney Cronin is here, ESPN Bears reporter, television star. See you at the top. What is that hat?
It's a hat that, what's the Milan, the brand that like I see all of these players and all of these dudes covering training camp wearing. I'm like, I want a hat like that because apparently it's supposed to help you not sweat. It's like a wicking hat. And I bought this during training camp and I love it. It's a good mantra to live by. And as far as I can tell, my hair is not filled with sweat after I'm walking off the practice field. Maybe a little TMI, but there you go.
Sure. I was at a Miami, Florida game 2 weeks ago in Gainesville, and it was so hot, and I was like keeled over. I thought I was going to die. And all I could think about was, I don't know why this is so much hotter than training camp, because every time I was like getting a little dizzy, and I'm like, I sit there at training camp, 20 training camps. It's always 95 degrees. Oftentimes I'm wearing pants. I've never fainted. So like toughen up. Literally, that's my thought. It's like when players say practice is harder than games. Like standing at training camp should be harder than any other thing in your life.
It is like 2-hour practices. A Matt Eberflus practice when they go like to the very wire. God, we did so many days of that this year, Kevin, because remember, the Bears had 50 days between the time they reported to September 8th when they had the Tennessee Titans at home because of that Hall of Fame game. So I don't know. I feel like my whole year has been in training camp and I'm just kind of like living in a simulation right now. And all of a sudden, whoa, the regular season's here. And now we're on to week 2. So it's been a lot, but my hat has been with me the entire time.
I was going to say, I'm glad you bought it because there was a press conference yesterday with Vic Fangio in Philadelphia where he said that he was wearing some hat with a P on it, some designer hat. And he said somebody from San Francisco sent it to him. But it looks like an Eagles hat. It's like a green P. And then apparently he made clear that he just loves getting free stuff, which is the default of anybody in football. The default of anybody in football. And the story I think about all the time is I was at the Senior Bowl maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And there were a couple of coaches, like notable, like coordinator level coaches who were wearing the quarter zip or the windbreaker of the team that fired them. And I'm sitting there being like, I was talking to some guy in the NFL. I'm like, what? Come on, that's a little embarrassing, right? And the guy says to me, there is no greater force in football than free stuff.
And a lot of them keep that stuff afterwards. Yes. They may say that they don't, but when your entire wardrobe is outfitted by the equipment staff of your franchise, whether you still work there or not, you don't go out and buy other clothes. I know people who have like, where I've seen stuff in pictures, I'm like, wait, why? That's like 2 jobs ago. Why are you still wearing that? I
will say, I think it was the Rex Ryan Jets team. There was a number of stories about how so the whole staff gets fired and then they had a bunch of garage sales. So like if you were anywhere in central New Jersey in 2014 or whatever one it was, you get a lot of Jets coaching stuff on the cheap because they were just having like estate sales basically. All right. That's not what we're here to talk about. We could talk about it all day long. It's coaches getting free gear. But we're going to start here. Caleb Williams has a mediocre debut. The Bears have a great debut. The mood in Chicago on Thursday morning as we record this is what, Courtney?
Pretty optimistic, I think. And even from like the offensive players and the offensive staff, knowing that this was worse than anybody expected it to look. I don't think anybody was going in there with like real expectations that Caleb was going to throw for 4 touchdowns and 300 yards. Hell, we only saw 2 quarterbacks throw for 300 yards. That's week 1 for you. It's the league. It's a state of the league every year where offenses are trying to figure things out. And the Bears are no different. They just had the added caveat of a rookie quarterback going against a defensive coordinator he frankly knew nothing about. There's no real film on Denard Wilson.
Who's really smart, by the way.
I mean, incredible luck for them to draw the Tennessee Titans in week 1 and all of those unknowns. But you know, the further we get away from that Tennessee game, the more you can dive into, were these bad throws? Was he just off? Was it a communication issue? I think there are some things that you can look at, not necessarily rationalize, but understand that it's probably never going to look that bad and that jarring again, because it was week 1. It was his debut. And I remember when I was doing Countdown on Sunday, I heard Alex Smith talking about the kind of like, what were we going to see from Caleb Williams? Is it going to look like somebody who's going out there playing football or somebody going out there trying to play up to expectations? These expectations on him were insane. We knew he's going to be the number 1 overall pick for the last 2 years. There is no doubt that being in a city like this that's never had a 4,000-yard passer, the stat that's the low-hanging fruit that we always throw around, you press a little bit. And we all heard Caleb Williams talk on Hard Knocks about the fact that he doesn't get nervous before games. Yeah, I think that was apparent. I mean, when you rush through your drops, when you're trying to get used to the speed of the game and you have all this other stuff going on around you, you're naturally going to press a little bit. I don't think he pressed throughout. I do think that there were some good moments. It wasn't a complete disaster, despite the fact that he threw for 93 yards, no touchdowns through the air, and they didn't have a rushing touchdown either. But a lot to grow on, and I do think that here in Chicago, people look at it and say, all right, give the guy time because he's on a team that has a really good defense and a very opportunistic special teams unit, as we saw on Sunday. And it won't look like this if he's given the time to grow, where he doesn't have to like be perfect within fixing all of his mistakes and carry the team at the same time.
There's a lot there. Alex Smith has talked about this. He shouldn't have been out there as a rookie. Like the supporting cast wasn't good enough. He wasn't ready enough. I think that back then the college to pro transition was even more dramatic because of, he was in Urban Meyer's Utah offense that had probably no similarities to the NFL whatsoever. I think you're dealing with Lincoln Riley's offense, which has way more NFL concepts. And maybe the NFL has come towards more of Lincoln Riley. You have Cliff Kingsbury, at least kind of in a tertiary role there, who was going to kind of tell him what's going on. So the gap is bridged a little bit. For me, I think it's really hard week one. Peyton Manning was on this show, 9 months ago now? And I asked him about the the rookie interceptions. And he said that he actually was so spooked by the speed of the game that he went too fast. And you don't even think about that, right? Like you're like, oh my God, all you hear about for your entire life is he gets so much faster. He went too fast and started making those mistakes. So it's like, it's almost, it's like too warm, too hot, just
Sure.
right. It's very, very hard to figure out the exact right speed you need to play at. I want to ask, you mentioned the sort of league-wide thing. Any theories on why, and we've talked about this with a couple of people, but why September football looks so sloppy now? Watching all the training, the 50 days of training camp that you did, having the no sweat hat, knowing that, seeing other teams in the preseason, joint practices, whatever, you see a team like Will Levis trying to throw the ball away, hits Tyreek Stevenson. Like it just felt very sloppy to me. Any theories league wide on why it looks like that?
I've been thinking this honestly since 2018 and trying to track it for because the Vikings, when I used to cover them, I think they won 2 season openers in the 5 seasons that I was there. And they just looked, when they made the transition after that 17 year, the 4 years I covered them under when Kirk Cousins was their quarterback, they always looked like a mess, like a straight up mess in the first month of the season. And, there's trends that I think you can take early on, but I think the common theme is that most teams, a lot of teams don't play their starters in the preseason, and you really can't get a feel for what it's going to look like when nobody shows you anything. It's, you're in the very infancy stage of your season where I think week one is more akin to what the preseason would be like if they actually treated the preseason for what the purpose is, to get yourself into the speed of football, get yourself and your players, used to what it's going to be like. There were moments, and you brought up, I think it's interesting, like what you said about Lincoln Riley and what the spread offense concepts are for young quarterbacks having to adapt to in the NFL. I asked DJ Moore about that yesterday. Like, are you surprised that the chemistry that we had seen, and you guys have been talking our ears off about how good it feels out there during training camp, are you surprised that chemistry just felt off, like throws coming right behind you or a ball sailing past Keenan Allen? And he's like, no, not really, because these quarterbacks, when they're coming from college and you might be spread out 5 wide, it's different in the NFL, and the personnel's different, and having learning the nuances of how somebody runs a route. Like there's the breakdown that I think I saw Dan Orlovsky do about, Keenan Allen on the choice route. And it was simply a body language thing, like a very small thing that Caleb Williams might not have picked up on just yet. It's those little things that you don't really get to rep. You can rep it all you want in training camp. That's fine. But going against a different defense that's not going to go, slow up on you and go a little easier on you at the end of a play, like that takes 3-4 weeks maybe. The first quarter of the season's always sloppy. I've never, outside of maybe week 4, what was the Rams Chiefs game?
Rams Chiefs, the game that was supposed to be in Mexico City and moved to LA.
That was a great game early on in that 2018 season. Like I can't think of any games outside, even last week when the Chiefs and the Ravens were in Kansas City. The Ravens looked really sloppy, and then they came and fought back, and they were a toe away from winning. Like those are things that I don't think when you are a more polished team towards the end, the midpoint of the season, towards the end of the season, I think even Isaiah Likely said it. You're going to see a different version of us when, predicting that they were going to play each other again in the playoffs. That's the same, I think, for every team in the NFL, where you're just trying to figure this out because you really didn't do much in the preseason. You use the preseason to go 50% speed in these games, and sometimes your quarterbacks play, sometimes they don't. I think Caleb Williams got some necessary reps in the preseason, but nobody went into week one judging him solely off what we saw in 2 series against Buffalo and the first half against the Cincinnati Bengals.
2 more questions about Caleb Williams before we get to the broader NFC. I want to start here. Nick Saban famously told his former player, did Matt Eberflus coach under Saban?
He coached under him and he played for him. So he coached under him for one season at Toledo.
There you go. Okay, so told his former protege, I guess maybe you're always a Nick Saban protege, the expectations are a killer with a young quarterback. And I tend to agree with that things start to snowball or whatever. After one bad game, and I think we've gotten away from this a little bit as a media ecosystem where we declare a guy a bust like immediately, or there's somebody on Chicago radio or New York radio says, "Oh no, he sucks. I'd rather have Drew Lock," whatever. What is the reaction to Caleb Williams not being the savior week one? Like, what is the media ecosystem? What is talk radio? What are the fans saying? Is there an element of it? I know this isn't going to be the case, but fans, I don't think like a lot of Bears fans. Bears fans are wounded. Bears fans have never seen a 4,000-yard passer. They don't know what it looks like. There has to be some in the back of their head element of here we go again, only because that is what they've become conditioned for. I know Caleb Williams is going to be a lot better than Justin Fields, but if you're a Bears fan, you can't possibly know that because you've been hurt so many times. The reaction is what?
The reaction, if you pare it down at different levels, all right, what did we see? We saw a quarterback who did not look comfortable by and large throughout most of his debut. Is that going to change with time? Most people are willing to go there. You also saw a quarterback who didn't turn the ball over. That's huge. Like, it wasn't like he was throwing into really dumb windows or he ended up, fumbling the ball away or getting a strip sack. Like, there were times like he took the 19-yard sack. It felt like up until that point in the first half, they went 3 and out. Like, they, had a bunch of drives that ended in punts, but they were still moving forward. And then that 19-yard sack sets them way back, and I think it set play calling back. I think it kind of took the wind out of their sail. And then there was a big lull until the blocked punt that was returned for a touchdown. It's most fans and nobody left. I was curious about this because I was watching from my seat in the press box, seeing what the crowd was looking like. Were there people who were just willing to hit the eject button, say, all right, no, I'm done with this. Like, we've been sold a false bill of goods here on Caleb Williams. I didn't get the sense that anybody felt like that, at least in terms of the crowd. But this team was constructed.
I think Will Levis tried to leave. I think at one point Will Levis just tried to leave the earth. Yeah, he tried to leave the earth.
So did his head coach with that great saying about punting on 1st and 10 in the second half. I love that. Nice little throw him under the bus move. But most people look at the situation, and what we've been told about the Bears situation is that this is the best situation for a rookie quarterback maybe ever to come in with the number 1 overall draft pick, because you have a team that finished on an upswing last year in a really good defense. And when I was talking with Tyreek Stevenson after the game, he pointed out to me, he's like, we knew and expected that Caleb Williams is going to have some struggles here. Put the onus on us. We want to be his kickstand, is what he said. So a little bike analogy there. Montez Sweat said security blanket. They love their analogies, apparently, on the defense. I don't know what's going to be next. His parachute, like his
parachute. There we go.
That's why the panic is not nearly as high as it could be. If Caleb Williams went out there and was just awful and was the reason that they almost lost the game versus, hey, I did enough to keep us in here. They score on the 2-point conversion after the Stevenson 43-yard pick six. He got them into field goal range a couple other times. Sometimes it's just doing enough, kind of like what his predecessor did for the Pittsburgh Steelers, like just do enough to get your team to win. And I don't think anybody's feeling super confident about what they saw from Justin Fields in week one. Same thing with Caleb Williams. No one's like, okay, that's, a great performance that you want to write home about. Caleb's been very self-aware about that. But even he woke up this week and said, okay, like, reality time. I won my first NFL start. It's something that all of these quarterbacks dating back to the David Carr days and drafted number 1 overall can't stake claim to. And I went through and looked at the last 5 first round picks, what the first round picks at quarterback who have played in a week 1 game. Baker Mayfield didn't start until week 4. You can't have that come from behind win the week before in week 3. But Kyler Murray didn't put it on until the fourth quarter, and then that game ended up in a tie in overtime. Joe Burrow struggled. Yeah, we know what happened last year with Bryce Young. I mean, these are trends that most first round picks, most number 1 overall quarterbacks stake claim to. That it's always it's tough sledding in week 1, but to know where Caleb is, where he's come from, the talent around him. Yes, they're dealing with some injuries to the receiving core, so it should be pretty tough, if he doesn't have 1 or 2 of his top receivers in Houston this weekend. But, it's going to look better. The result might not be a win every time, but it's going to look better than what it did because there's things you can fix. Like run support was non-existent. I know that Matt Eberflus said he liked what they did efficiency-wise. Not the case. The offensive line is a work in progress, and I even think for them, because that's always the scapegoat here in Chicago, there are times where I feel like they reverted back to what they used to do with Justin when they would get out in scramble mode. When in scramble mode, Caleb's looking to throw the ball downfield. He's not looking to run. And it felt like there were times where that communication and, that wasn't completely on the same page between the O-line and their quarterback. That takes time to rep at game speed to know how to fix it.
Fascinating. First of all, Justin Fields still not using the middle of the field in a new city, so something to watch there. I'm curious as Siri for some reason starts on my phone. I guess Hey Justin Fields is a prompt for me.
To me. I was moderating a panel last night, and somebody said something, and all of a sudden on my watch, I had everything transcribed what this person said, and then Siri started repeating it back to me. So
there was someone recently, someone in media that I don't really call a lot or call ever, that I said their name on one of these and it started to dial. It may have been Orlovsky. I would never call Orlovsky in my life. And I say, I'm like, oh my God. Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words, Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the types of benefits only Caesars can offer. Hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire. Let's move on to the broader NFC here, because I think this includes the Bears. And this is a Bears focused question still, although it's changed a lot. I was on Dominic Foxworth's show last week, and the debate question was, should the Bears expect to make the playoffs? And Dominic said, no, you should never put any sort of meaningful expectations on a rookie quarterback because you never know. And I tend to agree. We're talking about how different of a sport it is, but they've got those weapons. They've got an improved defense. You saw it. They've got improved special teams, good special teams. And I'm sitting here looking at the NFC saying, man, there's a lot of crappy teams. And then after week 1, Jordan Love might be out a month. There's some weird subterfuge thing going on where they're saying he might play this Sunday. I expect to see Malik Willis. The Rams, and I don't think we've reckoned with this nationally enough, Puka Nacua is going on IR and might miss more games. They both tackles got hurt. I mean, that's rolling downhill really quickly. And Sean McVay's worked miracles before, but there's a difference between eking out wins with a injured roster and competing for the 5 seed, the 6 seed, let alone the NFC West. So I'm looking at an NFC that wasn't good to begin with, and it's even weaker after week 1. And not like they didn't look that sharp. In Jordan Love might be out 6 weeks kind of way. I'm curious how you view the NFC right now and the Bears' place in it. And I'll just give you the floor on any of that.
It feels like it did at the start of last season, very top heavy with maybe 4 teams that you're confident in. And I won't go as far to be like, is this team a Super Bowl contender? Because it's week 1. And, the teams that impressed me the most in the NFC would be Detroit, the way that they ran the ball, especially in overtime. And that was big boy football to win that game. Obviously, San Francisco. I think they will be just fine. I think you slow play this Christian McCaffrey injury for as long as you can, because with that, they out-scheme everybody. That's what they did to the Jets. That's what they're probably going to do to Minnesota this week. Those 2. The Cowboys looked good. And I'm not even focused on Dak and CD and any of that. Mike Zimmer got in his bag. Week 1, 2 years removed from being in the NFL. I thought what he drew up with Micah Parsons, all the pressures. like they looked real. I mean, they're also playing a quarterback and an offense, and yes, an offense missing 2 tackles, whatever. Like Cleveland looked awful, but
yeah.
Dallas made them look awful in a lot of respects. Yep. But that's,
Micah Parsons does that.
Yeah, he does. And I'm I was just really impressed by what they showed defensively. So that's 3 teams right there. And then Philadelphia. I mean, lo and behold, the Saquon Barkley deal worked out in their favor. And I'm sure Giants fans are still salty about it. But that's 4 teams that I'm looking at right now saying I would be confident projecting those 4 without question into the postseason. Now, everybody else, teams that we expected to be good, the Atlanta Falcons, the Green Bay Packers. Well, there's reasons for, that I'm not jumping the gun with either of those. Bad play in Atlanta, an injury that could hold up things for the Green Bay Packers. It has such a feel of last year where the AFC is still murderer's row 1 through 7, and then there's 4 teams right now that you'd have a lot of fear about playing in the NFC.
Yeah. I mean, part of that is the quarterback play because, I mean, I've said this, I've compared it to golf. I'm a big golfer, but like there's a handful of guys in the PGA Tour and now LIV who are so good they should win every single week. And that's how I view. And you only need a couple of things to go right in the short game or the putting because their ball striking is so good and they'll win the tournament. Colin Morikawa, John Rahm, you know the guys, and Scotty Scheffler, obviously. But with quarterback play in the AFC, like I'm looking at 5 or 6 teams who have the quarterback where it's like you actually, and I'm throw in the Chargers and then the usual suspects, obviously, who compete every year. You only need a couple of things to go right, and those teams can win the Super Bowl. In the NFC, I don't see those quarterbacks, and that's why when I picked the Packers to win the NFC, and part of the reason I'm a little nervous about this Jordan Love injury is they still need to build on last year. They still need to have the chemistry with their wide receivers build a little bit. They need one of those guys to become not a true number 1, but kind of an alpha on routes. Mm-hmm. And we kind of understand what the pecking order is because there's 5 number 2s. And so that gives me a lot of pause that in the regular season, when regular season reps are so valuable, Jordan Love might miss a month. That is very, very, very concerning for me. So I don't know where it goes, but I mean, it honestly will not take much for the Bears to get in position to be the type of team that wins a playoff game.
Because I think if I'm not mistaken on this, the Packers schedule where the bulk of their division games are, it's like similar to how it's stacked up for Chicago. Chicago starts week 11 through 18. There's 6 games in there of their final 8 that they face Green Bay, Minnesota, and Detroit. The way it works is that, I think it's similar for most of the teams in the division, just based on how like the scheduling was when the schedules came out in May. I think it is weird. The whole, Matt LaFleur saying that like he's not officially ruling Jordan Love out just yet. That was, I think it's gamesmanship, but they wouldn't have traded for Malik Willis. And I know we've seen a guy throw for 350 yards in his entire career and not thrown for a touchdown and a couple interceptions. You don't, as a Packers fan, look at that and you're not super confident about the quarterback himself, but can you not be confident in this play caller? I mean, what has Matt LaFleur done to show people anything other than I can scheme around quarterback play? He did it with Blaine Gabbert, years ago. And I'm not panicked about that one just yet. I think that they can do just enough to come out of this. Let's say like come out of the first quarter of the season 2-2 at worst. Like, I don't think that means that you're tanking, your chances to get back to the divisional playoffs and then take it a step further, because they would have put Jordan Love on IR if they were worried that this was going to be something that took him out for 8 weeks potentially. But if it's a 3-week injury, if it's a 6-week injury, you can also still sign somebody. If Malik Willis is terrible, I understand why they didn't sign Ryan Tannehill just yet. I get that. I know a lot of people are like chomping at the bit about it, but take the approach that the Vikings used in 2017. Sam Bradford goes down week 1.
Yeah.
They don't end up going out. At the time, it was sign Colin Kaepernick because he was the big free agent name available. For a multitude of reasons, they didn't do that. And they ended up catching lightning in a bottle with Case Keenum because they were trying to get to the point where Teddy Bridgewater could come back off the PUP list. And, that was your goal. Get to week 6, because I think he had to be on it for 6 weeks. And then you can have Teddy come in and everything will be fine. Then Sam Bradford will come back and, so on and so forth. They ended up riding all the way with Keenum to the NFC Championship and not needing to turn to Teddy Bridgewater. That was just the way that things worked out. But there was always this feeling of, if it's going to look really bad with one quarterback and you don't want to throw this season away, a season that you have a really good defense, and we'll see what Jeff Hafley's defense is going to be in Green Bay. I mean, I thought it looked decent week 1. I think there's a lot to clean up on. Again, defenses too, trying to adjust, and he's a first-time NFL defensive coordinator. There's a lot there that can improve upon from week 1. But their schedule doesn't scare me early on. They have a lot of these AFC South teams. They have the Titans. Colts. They have the Colts.
I have it up. Colts, Titans, Vikings, Rams, Cardinals, and then Texans.
That's a schedule that you don't need to go out and sign somebody else outside of your building.
They need Jordan Love back for October 20th against the Texans, basically. Because who knows what the Rams are. And also the Rams are on the road. Maybe you just say, chalk that up to a schedule loss. I don't know. But I completely agree. You mentioned Mike Zimmer. I think he's really going to help. You covered him.
Mm-hmm.
What are your best Mike Zimmer stories? Because he's a character, man. He's a character. Like, I remember being at training camp, and I it was only one day a year for me. Mm-hmm. But I remember the day that he held an impromptu press conference to deny a fake Anthony Barr trade rumor.
Yeah,
you remember this?
I do remember this.
Nobody had made it up, and he was like, "We're not trading Anthony Barr."
And we're all looking
and
at each
everybody
other
was like,
"Mike, where did this come from?
What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Anthony Barr is my guy."
It was. From my understanding,
it's like a Reddit comment or something.
It was not even like a blog post from like Purple PTSD or some other, Vikings fan site. It was some comment that was floated to him that, because this was 2018 and this was the time that like Barr, it was going into, I believe it was his final season. Because remember, like then he ends up like leaving in free agency the following year and then coming back because he was like, I don't want to leave Mike Zimmer. That was so weird when Zim comes out and like we're like, no one asked about this. Like
no one has talked about this at all.
Did you invent this out of thin air? That was a good one. I mean, I have so many Zim stories. My favorite probably would be when I went down to the ranch in Walton, Kentucky. So I went in 2019 before training camp started, and he taught me how to skeet shoot. So like, clay pigeon, like that thing. So I got to do that with him. And remember, he has a detached retina in one eye, had a serious, serious eye surgeries to repair it. So he's, effectively blind in one eye, cannot see the scoreboard unless he puts his hand in front of his eye. Like it's always been kind of this thing. So like, I was curious about his aim and his shooting and how accurate he's going to be. And the way that he has trained himself to do this it's pretty impressive to watch because he can do it like, things moving up there. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm listening to him. And it was cool getting coached by him in that moment of how to do it. And I remember when I got my first one, I was so excited. But I kind of leaned back with the gun, like not like I kind of like to be like, get some recognition. Like, I did it. And you're like, whoa, I put the gun down. I mean, it was a single shot and it was like whatever the thing is it's like a BB gun more or less. But that was really cool. Like, I mean, he's got so much space down there. That place the last 2 years has become his solace. Through, losing a job, losing his son, Adam, who was on his staff all these years in Minnesota. And it was a really fun story to get a chance to see a different side of him when he's away from football.
Courtney Cronin. What else you got? You got TV coming up?
Yeah, I mean, Around the Horn, the usual.
There we go.
It's week 2 down in Houston, so headed down there in a couple days to see if they're able to pull off the upset. And, it was funny because, like, I was watching Sunday Night Football, and immediately after the game's over, and certain people didn't know the overtime rules, you see C.J. Stroud versus Caleb Williams and the bar that will never – I don't think will ever be crossed again. I don't know if Caleb Williams will have a CJ Stroud season, but it's so funny that these two will be inextricably linked forever because the Bears could have had CJ Stroud. They decided that not to hold on to that pick, to send it to Carolina, and then, of course, got Caleb Williams into the fold. So it's going to be...
You would have more reporting on this certainly than me. Did they like CJ Stroud more than Bryce Young? I was always under the feeling that that Bryce Young, despite what anybody says, was the chalk number 1 pick.
I think for most teams he was, and anybody can have revisionist history on what they want. Like did they know that CJ Stroud was going to be CJ Stroud? I mean, certainly if the Panthers did, they would have taken him. I think that was more of they need to give Justin Fields the 3rd year to figure it out, that they really weren't even considering, because the roster wasn't in a point to take a quarterback number 1 overall. Like they were trying to build it to where they had the structure in place so they wouldn't have put a quarterback in a situation like a Bryce Young found himself in Carolina.
Well, it worked out for them. Did not work out for Carolina. Courtney Cronin, we'll see you on probably count some hits on Sunday. You're all over the radio, all over TV. Thanks for coming on, buddy.
Yeah, thank you for having me.